Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 155 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hello, everybody. We are a father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. And we are here today to talk about Nebraska's win over Louisiana Tech and our upcoming game against Michigan, as well as what happened in the wider world of college football during week 4 of the season.
Yes, a great weekend, actually, of some really great, entertaining games.
Yes, there were a lot of good games this weekend, which we'll get into later in the podcast. But to kick us off, we're going to crack open our beverages, as is tradition. I have my Japanese Sapporo beer here. Just bought a 12-pack of it, so I'll be drinking more of it throughout the this podcast season.
So I'm just amazed. You is that a premium? Do you have to pay a lot for that beer?
No,
or is it pretty common out there?
No, it's pretty normal.
Is it? Okay. Well, that's cool. Well, I'm drinking the last of my, Labatt Blue, the Canadian beer that I have grown so fond of in my years in Michigan. It's kind of the staple, and just a fine Pilsner.
The listeners must think you've got a hoard of this because you've been talking about your last Labatt Blue for like the past 3 episodes.
Well, I did have a couple cases of it, and I've been giving it away.
There we go. All right.
There we go.
Cheers.
Here we go, bud. Cheers. Absolutely.
There we go. I was curious, did you have more of that Nebraska one, the one that's like with the collective?
Yeah, I'm going to buy some of that before I leave, so I'll certainly be drinking that in future weeks when I'm not here in Lincoln, because this will be our last week to enjoy the ambiance of God's country and the good life. And then we're going to be heading to Kansas and start working our way south towards Florida.
All right. There we go. Well, we played against Louisiana Tech this past weekend, a Conference USA opponent. And on the last podcast, we gave our predictions for the score. I said it would be 28-10, and you predicted a higher scoring 38-24. And the final score ended up being 28-14, so I was pretty close on my prediction.
Yes, you were.
And then we also gave kind of thoughts on the quarterback situation. I said I thought Harburg should be our starter no matter what, and you kind of said Jeff Sims should start if he's healthy, but if he's not, then Harburg should be the guy. And as it turned out, Jeff Sims still wasn't 100%, so Coach went with Harburg. And it was an interesting game, kind of similar to our previous game against Northern Illinois in a lot of ways, in that we kind of struggled in the first half to get the offense really going, but made more progress in the second half. Though this time around, we didn't have our top 2 running backs in the game because they were both injured, so we had to kind of find schemes and let these other players kind of take the reins there. And thankfully, Anthony Grant, who was our more experienced running back, who had to kind of step up into the lead role here because of those injuries, had a good day and ran for over 100 yards, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so there were some good signs there, also some mixed results, though, in terms of some of our struggles on offense, struggles with pass defense, some special teams, both successes and failures. So it was good to get a win, but it was definitely not a pretty win.
Right. Well, and I would add to all those various challenges that you just described, also just the whole nature of the game between the starts and stops caused by, it just seemed like there were an enormous number of television timeouts, and like they added extra ones or something. And then we had a bunch of injuries as well. So there must be an option that if there are injuries, they can take advantage of those and pump some more commercials in, because it was like so disruptive between injuries, penalties, which they had a lot of. We had a few too, but they had even more. Between all the penalties, injuries, and then just the regular scheduled TV timeouts, there was no continuity to that game at all. It was so disruptive and so hard to get either team into a rhythm because of it.
Right. Well, and like you said, you were in the stadium, so you had a better sense of that than us at home. And you're correct. They had 12 penalties for 100 yards, while we had 6 for 55. So, yeah, they had quite a few. And yes, I've certainly seen it plenty of times where there's an injury on the field and they go to a TV timeout, to fit in more commercials. So that definitely is standard practice, I would say.
Right, right. And so it was pretty challenging to watch. And then, of course, you had the rain delay, which then added another element to it as well.
Right.
So,
well, and was it actually raining, or was it just the lightning in the distance?
oh no, it was raining, and actually there was a short period of time where it rained pretty hard. But it was the lightning that basically caused them to clear the stadium and make everybody go underneath and all that.
Right. Which it's been quite a while since I can last remember a Nebraska game that had a weather delay like that. With the except, I guess there was that one, the very first game of Scott Frost's tenure, right? Was that game that just got rained out completely.
Got canceled. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. That's the last one I remember.
Yep. Bizarre.
Yeah. But those sorts of situations seem to me, they favor the team that's down, right? Because it kind of kills the momentum for the team that was currently winning the game and gives the team that's currently losing extra time to kind of come up with a strategy to try to turn the tables, right? And we kind of saw that where our guys came out a little flat at the beginning of that the fourth quarter when time resumed, and they managed to score another touchdown on us. And it didn't help that apparently Henrik Harburg, our quarterback, was hurt on the last play that he was in. So that was why Chubba Purdy, our third team quarterback, came out in the next offensive series. Didn't do too much, so we were forced to punt. And so they had the ball again going on a drive that thankfully ended in a interception by our defense that ended the game. But it certainly was, the game was not out of reach, even though we had done much better than them up to that point.
Right. Exactly right. And just, it's always uncomfortable when that sort of thing happens and you're the team that's leading, right? You just as soon get it over with. And in this case, I think there were some guys who maybe didn't fully operate after they came back, right? Like they're playing at 90% instead of 100%.
Yes. And just so to give some specific stats, so Anthony Grant, who I mentioned earlier, had 22 carries for 135 yards, and Heinrich Harburg had 19 carries for 157 yards.
Keep in mind, both of those guys had 70-plus yard runs called back.
Right. Yes, both of them did, which we'll talk about. Which we'll talk about in a bit, because those were major.
But I mean, add 70 yards to both of those totals, and they're both over 200 yards.
Right. Yeah. So great day on the ground for us. Not so much in the air. No. I will say, I believe Emmett Johnson, he was one of the younger guys we did have in the game, but he only had 2 carries for 6 yards. So I'm not sure the coaches were confident enough yet to give him a lot of touches. And clearly Harburg and Grant were doing well. So I can see why they were kind of going with the hands that were hot, as it were.
Right. Well, and the one time that he did run with the football on the kickoff, it was a great play by the defense, I will admit, that just stripped him right out of the ball. He fumbled, right, and had to get on his own fumble, which I think he did. So that doesn't, instill confidence, right?
Right. That's true. We had 312 total yards of rushing it versus 170 yards on passing. We were 8 of 18. And the one positive I would say that did come out of that was Billy Kemp IV. He's, shown up quite a bit in some of our previous games this season, but he had quite a few good catches in this game. He was 5 receptions for 62 yards, right, which certainly aren't mind-blowing numbers, but he got us some critical first downs that we needed. So he's kind of showing up as one of our most reliable receivers, I would say.
Right. Him and Thomas Fedone, who has got a touchdown for the third game in a row. now. He has had a touchdown in every game, every one of the last 3 games, and so he's obviously becoming a threat and can create some separation. Billy Kemp's just a great possession guy. We need somebody who can create separation at the wide receiver position, and some of the guys that are out there right now aren't getting that done.
Right. But yes, as you mentioned earlier, this was definitely a sort of strange game when it came to penalties and callback plays, right? Because Louisiana Tech had a kickoff return that was called back because of a holding called on them. So then that touchdown was taken off the board for them. And then like a series or 2 later, we had a big run that went for a touchdown that also got called back for holding, which I wasn't too upset about because A, on the replay, the guy was holding, it seemed like, and B, it had happened to the previous team. So it's like, okay, at least the refs are being consistent with it. But it was the second one, the second TD that called back for us in the second half, which I was more upset about because the our player upon the replay being shown, our player was holding the other Louisiana Tech player on defense, but the Louisiana Tech player had his hand right up on our dude's helmet, was like grabbing his helmet or hands to the face, that kind of thing. So I felt like at the very least it should have been offsetting penalties on both sides, but they didn't call it on the defense for some reason. I didn't understand why.
Right. Well, or if both are doing that, then maybe there's not an advantage either way, and let it be. So
right,
because that kind of some of that holding stuff is going on in every play. I mean, we saw some plays in other games that we were watching by television where literally their jerseys were practically being ripped off and they did not get called.
Right,
it's just crazy how they don't call that, but then if it's a running play, they call it.
Right.
It's just nuts.
Right. Well, and I think we'll talk about it later, but there was a player in the Washington State game, I believe, who had a number of great catches, some of which were one-handed. And if I recall right, there was one that he got in the end zone where the commentator was even saying like, oh, I don't know that he needed to do the one-hand thing. And then you could see on the replay that his other arm was being held by the defender.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So the frank truth of it is that sort of stuff is happening on every play, in some form or another. And it's just like, how egregious is it? And do the refs see it? Because obviously they don't have eyes everywhere.
Well, but there's 8 of them out there. I mean, and there are 2 guys on either side of the line of scrimmage, and one of their primary jobs is to look for that shit among the offensive and defensive line. Now, the holding, like you're describing in a receiver situation, there's also, referees back in the backfield there. That's their job, is to basically govern pass interference and defensive holding, and they just don't do it. And some of it is so blatant. It's like, how can you not see that?
Right.
Where the hell are you looking? If you're not seeing that, where are you looking? Right. So I don't think having more refs, for example, if you put another referee on the field, is that going to make it better? I don't know that it would. I think they just need to, maybe the average fan just doesn't understand the rules because those rules are very complicated, and why they call holding in rushing situations way more than they do in passing is partially because in a rushing situation, if somebody holds, it's more obvious the benefit gained by the offense by that hold. So if you're using the judgment like a lot of basketball referees have to use, where is that contact giving one player an advantage over the other? And if the judgment is no, they're not, then I let it go. If the judgment is yes, that gave that person an advantage, then I call it. Okay, and that's what they do in basketball all the time. And I just wonder if the actual detailed coaching of the referees is to that degree. And if it is, then that needs to stop, or the interpretation needs to be changed, because the letter of the law is not being followed.
Right. But even though those touchdowns were called back, like you say, and affected those rushing stats, I think it's good to show that we have that explosive power. If we're able to, break through a tackle or get a clean hole. Harburg's run in particular, he definitely went to like a second level of speed
Yeah.
and just took
Yeah.
off, and there was no chance of those Louisiana Tech guys catching him, which was great to
Right.
see.
I agree. And the offensive line in the second half, they were making some holes. Even on the play, if you watch the TV broadcast, the commentator was going crazy over it on the play where Harburg turned the wrong way,
Right.
or the running back turned the wrong way, and they ended up botching the transition, and he ended up getting tackled for a loss. But that hole that was there, if they had done that handoff properly, was you could drive a truck through it,
Yeah.
and they would have gone a long way. So it's disappointing that we didn't get to see what that play might have been if they had executed in the backfield.
Yeah, you're right. The commentators did make a note of that.
Yeah. So the bottom line is that after a sluggish start, obviously our offensive line was able to adjust, and this team we played, Louisiana Tech, they run an offense that's very hard to defend, and their defense is both talented. They got a lot of athletes, right? Being in Louisiana, and they played pretty darn well. They have some guys that absolutely would be, contributing on Power Five football teams if they had the opportunity to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like they were devoid of talent.
Right.
So I was impressed by Louisiana Tech as a football team, and I suspect they're going to win a few games now that they're going to be moving into their conference play.
Right. Speaking of them, they had 21 rushes for a total of 46 yards, so we shut down their running game well. But they had 292 passing yards. The quarterback was 27 of 42 with the one interception at the end of the game. So they had a total of 338 yards, while we had 419. So yeah, that was basically my rating of the defense this game, was that we did great on the rushing defense, but the passing defense definitely needed work, especially with like some of those drives late in the game where they were able to score on us kind of easily, it felt like. And we also got no sacks in this game. Well, they got 3 on us.
Well, and again, it's the type of offense, right? They spread you out from sideline to sideline. Again, this is something you probably maybe couldn't pick up on as much watching on the TV broadcast as if you were there, but their splits were so wide. And so they basically are forcing your defensive backs to be so far away, so close to the sidelines to cover those wide receivers, that they're pretty much out of the play in terms of being able to provide any kind of run support. So the whole idea of their running game is to spread you out from sideline to sideline, basically take enough guys out of the box, and then hope to pop and create a crease, and then that guy's off to the races, right? And we were able to defend that, but to do that, we had to become way more conservative. We did not blitz very often, because if you wholesale blitz and you add extra guys to the rushing, the line of scrimmage, and you're wrong, then that guy's running wide open and there isn't anybody else close to him, right? So it just, the risk reward wasn't there. So I think coach tended to be pretty conservative on that game in terms of how he called the defense. The problem is that also demonstrated that we do not have any defensive linemen that on their own can get to the quarterback, right? We got no pressure on them when we just played them straight up. We have to blitz to get pressure.
Right. So like you say, yeah, it may be a scheme thing. So we'll see how that plays out against future opponents.
Right.
And then in terms of special teams, like I said, it was a bit of a mixed day. On the one hand, we had some good punts that pinned them deep in terms of flipping the field. And then we had the fake field goal that caught everyone by surprise on 4th down, that got us a critical first down that led to our first touchdown of the game, which was well executed and obviously was a success. Caught me by surprise, I can say that. So those were pluses. On the not so good side, we missed a 41-yard field goal And then obviously we gave up the kickoff return to Louisiana Tech. Now it was called back because there was holding, but still not a great sign that
Right.
you'll definitely be reviewing that in practice this week.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah, our special teams right now are still pretty shaky. I'm not thrilled with where we're at on that in that regard.
Right.
So
And I think there was a situation later in the game where we were, tentatively within field goal range on a fourth down. I think it was 4th and 2. And I think clearly coach decided I'm not feeling great about my field goal kicker right now, so we're going to go for it. And thankfully we got it. We were able to use the fact that our rushing had been good throughout the game to get those 2 yards. But
right.
that's definitely an area I'm going to be watching moving forward, because I believe I want to say we're 1 of 2 or 1-2-2 in terms of field goals. We've made 1 and we've missed 2 so far this year.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's definitely an area to watch out for. But once again, a win's a win, even if it's an ugly win.
Yep.
Now, as we look ahead to next week, we have to play against Michigan, who's currently undefeated and one of the higher ranked teams in the country. So obviously we knew from the beginning of the season that this was going to be a tough game no matter what. And it is definitely shaping up that way. When you're having to struggle for a full half, to get your offense going against Louisiana Tech and, Northern Illinois, that does not bode well for your chances against a very good Michigan defense. So I'm not loving our chances. I believe we're minus 18.5 in the current spread.
Yeah. No, that is absolutely right. We are not ready for prime time, so to speak, at all. So we're going to have to, take our lumps. It's part of the learning process. What I'm hoping we can do is that our defense can slow them down and at least make it interesting for a while, right? If our offense could find a series or 2 of plays that maybe we haven't shown or we've shown only a little bit, that we execute at a decent level and see if we can squeak out a few points, especially early when they're still feeling out what our game plan is, and keep it interesting, right? Because I would love it if when we went into halftime, we're still in the game, right? Like there's at least a reasonable opportunity that we could win the football game. That would keep, fans interested. That would give the team something they could hang their hat on. And then if the superior talent and maturity of the Michigan program, emerges over the course of the second half, well, so be it. I could be convinced I was okay with that, right? Especially if we got out of it without any more injuries. Hell, right now, the biggest thing I'm worried about is our injury total just keeps piling up, and we're just not going to have the depth of talent to compete during the games that we have a reasonable chance of winning. Like the following week, we have to play Illinois on a Friday. So we're going to play Michigan on a Saturday, and then we have to turn around and play an away game at Illinois on Friday.
Right. Yeah, that is a tough 1-2 punch there. And as mentioned earlier, Heinrich Harburg, the quarterback, was apparently hurt on the last play of the game. We still don't know exactly what his injury is. Coach said today in a press conference that it's not super serious, so he's confident that he'll still practice and that we may see him this weekend, but we'll have to kind of wait and see on that, which obviously is not a great sign. And then also Luke Reimer, who's one of our best players on defense, is questionable if he'll be back for the Michigan game.
And so far, whenever somebody says, they've said players were ready to go, and it takes 2 more weeks before we actually see them on the field. So this coaching staff has tended to be overly optimistic on their medical assessment.
Okay, that's a fair trend to observe, I would say.
Yes.
Which I think leads to an interesting question about the classic question we've been asking for the past few podcasts. Okay, who do we start at quarterback? Because I was going to say, even if Jeff Sims, what my earlier thought before I knew about Harburg's injury was that even if Jeff Sims is healthy, I'm not sure you want to play him in this Michigan game because Michigan's defense is going to be coming for us. There are going to be sacks. It's going to be hard on the quarterback, no matter who it is. And we want Jeff Sims to build up his confidence. And he hasn't been able to do that in these 2 games. So you would kind of want to hopefully bring him in against a more winnable opponent. And hopefully we see him perform better without some of the mental mistakes that we saw in the first 2 games, and then we build something further. That's what you've talked about before. So I thought stick with Harburg, he'll take some beatings, but hopefully he's a tough guy. He'll get through it and we'll continue on. But now Harburg is nursing an injury, and we'll presume for now that it's not super major and that will be able to play. But, if it's something with like his leg, right, that might affect his ability to run the football, which is clearly his greatest strength. So do you put Jeff Sims in there if he's feeling better, or do you go to Chuba, and go with the quarterback that hasn't had a full start all season against Michigan?
Well, see, my argument last week was that if you didn't play Sims this past week, that it was unfair to start him at Michigan, because you're throwing him to the lions, right? Like you're throwing him to the den, so the likelihood that he's going to have a low performance game is greater because of the quality of the competition, right? So now though, because basically all of them have been injured, right? I mean, Chuba Purdy was unavailable because he's had some injuries that were sustained during practice. So all 3 of them at this point, I mean, it's game 5, right, of the season. There's nobody out there that's 100%. So now I think the coaches just need to simply make the choice of which guy gives us the best chance to win. And it's almost as much of a question of their health as it is about their ability, right? I mean, clearly, I think there's a separation between maybe Harburg and Sims versus, say, Chuba. I would say now that I have to put the psychological elements for Jeff Sims on the back burner now, and it's got to just be who's the most healthy, who's the guy that can execute the game plan we want to run the best, who's that guy. And if it's Jeff Sims, we put Jeff Sims out there. If it's Harburg, we put Harburg out there. If neither of those guys are near 100% and can't go, then it's Purdy. I think that's what they got to do. So, if I was guessing, I would say it's going to be Harburg, because that would make sense. Like you said, now that he's won 2 games, you got to put Harburg out there. But again, I think he has a short leash. Harburg, even though he's done well, he's led us to 2 victories. If it looks like his best strength, say running the football or passing, is not up to snuff because of his injury, well, you get him the hell out of there, both to protect him and also so that you can give Jeff Sims a chance to come in and with no expectation or pressure on him, because everybody expects us to lose. Let him just go out there and relax and maybe be the athlete that he is, and all of a sudden we see a different performance.
Right. Yeah, I generally agree with you. I think it's got to be who is the least injured, who are you feeling most confident about. I hope to see Harburg out there because, like you say, I mean, I've been advocating for him more on this podcast since he came in the 3rd game, and I'm happy to see him continue forward. So obviously we're wishing him and all the rest of the quarterbacks the best as they deal with these nicks and bruises. I wanted to ask you as well, just thinking about our overall start so far, right? I believe we said in our earlier podcast before the season started that obviously we wanted the 4-0 start. That would have been ideal. But a 3-1 start would have been acceptable as well, right? If we had tripped up to one of the first 4 opponents somewhere along the way. But here we are at a 2-2 start with 1 loss already in conference to Minnesota. So are you evaluating kind of the position where we're at now compared to your preseason expectations?
Well, definitely below what I was hoping. Like you say, I thought the reasonable expectation was 3-1, that we would, if we were really together and things were going well, not great, but well, that we would win one of the 2 first games. Like we would either beat Minnesota or we'd beat Colorado, and frankly, should have beaten Minnesota. So we were pretty close to the 3-1 in terms of our actual on-field performance. It just didn't translate to a victory up in Minneapolis. But now we're 2-2, so we just have no margin for error. We're gonna lose this week. Hopefully, we don't lose in an obliteration kind of fashion where you have to worry about the team psyche, right? You hope that we fight and play hard and have pride and end up giving Michigan a tussle, right? But they end up winning in the end. I could live with that. And then we have to just flush this one down the toilet and move on. And now, as I look at the rest of the teams that we have on our schedule, I tell you, Purdue's not looking like world beaters. Neither is Illinois. There's an awful lot of Western Division opponents, Minnesota, that are all looking very beatable, right? So that means that there's some wins out there for us if we take care of business. Now, we should have won ourselves against Minnesota, but the point is they're not going to be winning the division undefeated either, right? So we have a chance in this deal. Iowa got shellacked.
Yes, they did. And I agree with you. Probably for the next week's podcast, we'll do a more in-depth look at kind of the second half of the season and how we think things are going to play out. Because like you say, the rest of the teams are all tough, all tougher than the two that we've won so far, but all beatable as well. I would say, maybe with the exception of at Wisconsin, that one might be one you have to strike off the calendar. But refocusing on this Michigan game, we're going to give our predictions as we usually do for what the score will be and everything. Interestingly, looking at their schedule, they haven't played too tough of a schedule so far, and they've been quite consistent in terms of the scores. They won 30-3 over East Carolina, 35-7 over UNLV, 31-6 over Bowling Green, and 31-7 over Rutgers. So they've all been in that same range of like one score by the opponent and about 30 points by their offense. Some of those games I know were close in like the first half, right? And then Michigan would pull away in the second half. So they've had some of their own struggles on offense. So I would agree with you that I think if Tony White comes with a good game plan, and hopefully we're able to be more aggressive maybe than we were against Louisiana Tech, I think we can make some problems for them and slow them down. But the real problem will be our offense having to score against their defense, right? And Michigan is a team that's known for having plenty of big boys up on that defensive line. And so it's going to probably force us to throw it more than we're used to. And will Harburg or Jeff Sims or Chubba Purdy, be up to that task? That will be the question, I think.
I agree. I think, like you said, I think our defense will come with a good game plan. Frankly, there's some recent history, at least, that suggests that, the Michigan Wolverines struggled with a 3-3-5 when they played TCU. And kind of thought they needed to go away from their traditional offensive game plan, and they tried to do stuff that wasn't their bread and butter. So I have a feeling that they're going to want to correct that mistake, and I expect them to have a game plan that's very physical and tries to dominate at the line of scrimmage. And so hopefully that will allow our defense to use its variety and diversity to create some havoc and missed blocking assignments and things that frustrates them a little bit, right? But I have trouble believing or understanding how this offensive line is going to be able to play that defensive line and have any kind of consistent success. So you're right. I have a feeling we're going to be in a lot of third and long situations, which puts a lot of pressure on a quarterback who, at this point, we don't have any one of them that has the kind of demonstrated success that they could be confident going into that situation.
Yeah. Yep. So I think I'm actually going to go with the inverse of the score we just had against Louisiana Tech. I'm going to say 28-14. Our defense slows them down, but our offense is able to have some success, right? Score more on Michigan than anyone else has so far this season. But that in the end, we will fall short and lose 28-14.
Well, that's a good score, Alex. I hope you're right. I think it's going to be worse than that. I think maybe 14 is the right number on offense. I think we might score 7 points legitimately against their team, and then we're going to get a garbage time 7 points. So that's the 14 points we're going to score. But I have a feeling they're going to score more than 28. I think that they're going to open up the floodgates a little bit here, and they want to make a statement. It's their first away game, and so I have a feeling that we're going to feel the wrath of Michigan's true talent because they've frankly underperformed up till now, and we're going to be looking at a 42. I'm going to say 42-14.
Well, and one other factor I should mention is that their coach, Jim Harbaugh, had to sit out the first 3 games of the year because of a whole, recruiting violation, and that was a self-imposed penalty on him by the university. So I believe he was back then for this Rutgers game, and now he'll be back for us. So that is another small thing to consider.
Yes, absolutely. And and there's going to be a lot of Michigan fans in the crowd because they're very, very confident that they're going to beat us and beat us comfortably. So lots of fans are coming out to see the Nebraska football stadium and experience Nebraska football in a game where they're pretty confident they're going to kick our butt.
There you go. All right. So now focusing on week 4 of college football and the overall games that were going on. There were quite a few good games, as you mentioned. We gave some predictions for them. One of the ones that certainly got the most headlines was the Colorado-Oregon game. And we both predicted that Oregon would kind of wake Colorado up and beat them pretty soundly. I predicted 45-35 that they would win. Well, you predicted 49-21. But the final score actually ended up being worse than either of us were imagining, where it ended up being a score of 42-6 with Oregon being up 35-0 at halftime.
Right. And I believe they were up to 42-0, and then the 6 points were scored after that, if I remember the sequence of scoring. But so it was a whitewashing of sorts. I mean, they were very one-sided. It's going to just be interesting to see how Colorado's able to respond right now that they've been brought to the reality that, okay, we're not maybe as good as we thought. And again, they're playing without their best player, right? Their best player is hurt. And that was a huge hit against them. So we'll see if some other Pac-12 teams can put a hurting on them and slow down the train. But right now, I'm afraid that train is already moving in a very positive direction for the Buffaloes. And if I was the Big 12, I would look out, because if he stays in Boulder for any length of time, he is going to accumulate some serious talent.
Right. Two interesting things to note. Oregon's defense performed very well in that game, above my expectations, clearly. They had 7 sacks against the quarterback. And then also Colorado is playing this upcoming week against USC, which is obviously going to be another tough game for them. But after that game, their schedule definitely gets easier. They kind of had a front-loaded schedule in some ways. So I think they'll pull it together later on, especially if that Travis guy you were talking about, their best player, comes back from that injury, and still rally to a good winning season. But I will admit I got some catharsis from seeing Oregon beat them so bad, and again the Coach Prime train, derailing a little bit, let's say.
just a little, yeah. And people are already, I don't want to derail our podcast, so I won't go there. That maybe is another off-season conversation for us to talk about the implications of that.
Next is the Notre Dame game, which was Notre Dame Ohio State. That was a very anticipated matchup of 2 top 10 rated teams. I predicted that Notre Dame would win. I went for the upset, said they would win 31-28. Well, you said Ohio State would win 31-21. It was a home game for Notre Dame. Ended up being a lower scoring game of 17-14 with Ohio State winning. But frankly, it was a game that Notre Dame should have won from what I saw of the highlights afterwards.
Well, your uncle AJ and I were able to watch pretty much that entire game, and I would agree with you. Notre Dame had many opportunities to win this football game, but the truth is both teams, those were two heavyweights, man. They were back and forth. It wasn't that one game or one team was playing poorly and the other one was playing better or whatever. These were two talented football teams, well coached football teams that were just battling out and beating each other up. And it was quite impressive to watch.
Right. Well, so yeah, and the two stories I saw were one, Notre Dame lost on the last play of the game, right? With like 3 seconds left. Ohio State scored a touchdown that won them the game. So that's how close it was. And then number two, both teams went for it on fourth downs in certain situations, where they could have, punted it or kicked field goals or whatever. And they were often stuffed by the defenses. So there was some, when that happens, of course, people are like, well, then why didn't you do the other option? So it was good defensive performance by both teams, it would seem.
Yes, absolutely. And so a little surprising to me, because I had indicated that I had felt that Ohio State's defense was a little suspect, right? But that their offense was spectacular. Now, the one downside was Marvin Harrison Jr., who's probably the premier football player in the country and will likely be, the top draft choice or one of the top draft choices going into next season, got hurt, right, in this game. Turned an ankle, though, and actually did end up coming back to play, but I feel like didn't quite have the explosion that he had prior to that, and so he really wasn't a factor, either before the injury or after. He got some passes and stuff, and obviously anytime he's on the field, he's a factor because you got to worry about him, but he didn't produce numbers like you would have hoped he would. And maybe part of that is their quarterback. I don't know, but the bottom line is that it's Ohio State's offense that looked more suspect, not their defense.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then the last game that we gave a prediction for was Alabama Ole Miss, which was an important game for Alabama after kind of a tough start to their year. I predicted that Ole Miss would pull out the upset 24-17, while you predicted that Alabama would win 35-21. And the final score ended up being 24-10 with Alabama winning. So the margin was pretty close to what you had, right? They won by 14 points, but it was just lower scoring than you were anticipating.
Right. But again, I just felt like going into that matchup, and that was at Ole Miss too.
No, it was home for Alabama.
Oh, it was. Okay. All right. Well, then that makes that, that's probably why I had the margin higher. I don't know. But Alabama just, was a team that was going to execute at a higher level. And even though Ole Miss's offense had been very, very effective in its previous games, I just had a pretty strong feeling that Alabama was going to make life a little more difficult for Ole Miss's offense.
Right. Now, I will say I watched the highlights of that game again, and I don't, this was some comfort to Alabama fans, but I still saw a lot of worry signs for them. For example, they had to settle for quite a few field goals instead of getting touchdowns when they did get their offense going. And frankly, it was their defense that pulled them out of situations. For example, they got a blocked punt, I believe, which was pretty deep in Ole Miss territory, so that set them up for like an easy score. And then as well, Ole Miss was actually driving it later on in the game. I believe there was 2 or 3 minutes left, so there's still time left on the clock. And if Ole Miss had scored and then, gone for the onside kick, right, they had a chance to tie up the game and go into overtime. But Alabama's defense forced a fumble, recovered it, right, ended the game there. But I would say it was a closer game than the score maybe would make you think.
Gotcha. Yeah. I kind of agree. I mean, I watched a bit of that game. I'm not sure. I don't know. I just didn't feel like Alabama was like not in control though. I mean, so even though they weren't maybe being as opportunistic as they should be, the score could have been worse, right? It would have been even more lopsided. But I still feel like, it was obvious they were the better team
Okay.
to me.
Fair enough. And I believe they were leading for pretty much the majority of the game. So that is
Yeah.
one thing in their favor.
Yep.
And then this game was quite interesting. Florida State playing against Clemson at home for Clemson.
Yep.
Florida State coming in as the fourth ranked team in the country, and Clemson having kind of a tougher start to their year. And it ended up going into overtime with Clemson winning in the end, 31-24. But Florida State did not lead in the game until that overtime. It was either Clemson's leading or it was a tie game. And I believe Clemson's field goal kicker missed a field goal in the game, which of course, probably would have gotten them the win in the end. So kind of a frustrating one if you're a Clemson fan.
Yes. Well, we were watching this back and forth also, pretty much the whole way, and another very entertaining game to watch, frankly. But I truly believe Clemson was literally on the verge of taking control of the football game when Florida State blitzed and the guy went unblocked and just unloaded on the quarterback, who then proceeded to fumble, and it ended up being a pick six or a pick up the ball and scoop and score. That was a huge play that ended up tying the ball game. And prior to that play, Clemson was moving the football, had a 7-point lead, and looked to be in position to kind of take control of the game. And then that happened, and that changed the momentum. And then the second interesting storyline is, even before the game began, one of the pregame hype promotions that occurred was the whole conversation about the field goal kicker for Clemson. This was the guy that was at like South Carolina State or something, and was in a master's program, a law school or something. And somehow, they made the connection that he had eligibility left and he was a good field goal kicker and they needed one. So apparently I don't know if they had an injury or they were just desperate to find alternative legs to try out, but they brought him in, and Dabo personally recruited the kid, and he already had a job. He was going to graduate and he had an internship actually in New York at some big law firm, and he had to call them up and say, "Hey, is there any chance I could have a delay on my internship by 6 months because I have the chance to go play football for Clemson?" And the boss was like, "If you don't do it, I'll be disappointed. Absolutely, you got to go do that. And by the way, I'm going to buy tickets and come down and see you." And so he came down to the game. This guy that's going to be his boss. So kind of a funny story. But even Dabo admitted, either this is going to be a great, Cinderella story, or it's not going to end well. And sure enough, that kid misses a chip shot 30-yard field goal that would have given them a lead late in the game with like less than 2 minutes to go, and very likely, increase the chances that they win in regulation.
Right.
If only he had been able to make that kick. So sadly, it was not the Cinderella story.
Yeah, well, and I saw this comment online. I don't know if it's true or not, but this person said that his parents apparently pay for boxes, season boxes at Clemson Stadium, so that there might have been a financial interest in getting this kid, on board as well. So
I see.
That doesn't make the story better.
Right.
Yeah. One of the other interesting games, which we referenced before, was Penn State playing against Iowa. We didn't give a prediction for that, but you've said, I remember on the last podcast, that Penn State would kill them, and that ended up being true, 31-0. So yeah, rough day for Iowa fans.
It was, and I think they maybe didn't have 100 yards of offense. I think Iowa either it was less than 125, or it might have even been less than 100 yards of offense. I mean, they were inept.
Yeah, well, and that's what, that's kind of been Kirk Ferentz's problem, right? Is bad
Right.
offenses, but terrific defense, right?
Exactly. Yep. And they did, and even against Penn State, I mean, the score would have been much higher if it wasn't for the fact that they do have a very good defense.
Right. This was an interesting game. I sent you one of the highlights from it. It was Washington State versus Oregon State, the two
Yes.
teams that are remaining in the Pac-12, the
Yeah.
Pac-2.
The Pac-2. Yes. The
Yes,
Pac-2. Yes.
Pac-2. Um, it was a good game. It was 38-35 with Washington State winning at home. And they've got a receiver. I don't remember his name, but I think if he stays healthy, he's definitely going to be playing on Sunday because he had two amazing one-handed catches in this game. And then another great run after the catch, I should say, where he like spun around some players where they collided into each other and just kept going for a touchdown. So he was fun to watch for sure.
Yeah. And I feel like Oregon State, came into the season pretty highly regarded. And so I don't know that this is an upset, but it maybe would be defined as a mild upset.
Washington State was ranked 21 and Oregon State was ranked 14. So yes, I would say it was an
Yeah.
upset.
Yeah. Mild upset. Yep. Yep.
There you go.
Wow.
And just a couple other scores real quick. We had Utah versus UCLA, which Utah won, but it was close, 14-7. And then LSU won against Arkansas, but it was close, 34-31.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that final score on that LSU game. I hadn't reviewed that on Sunday. Interesting. Okay. Interesting. Huh. Well, and I don't know much about Arkansas, but I'm gonna have to look them up and take a gander at what they've got going on because I expected more of that than that from LSU.
Yeah. Frankly, from what I saw in the highlights, Arkansas very well probably should have won the game. They had to settle for 3 field goals. So LSU's defense kind of got it done for them, I would say.
Right, right. Well, and I just LSU's got an awful lot of talent, and so that guy Brian Kelly's got to get it going.
Get it going, Brian. All right.
Yeah.
Let's see here. All right. So I looked it up because I was curious. Then the Penn State Iowa game, their total yards 76.
Yeah, less than 100. Jeez, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty rough. Okay, so then looking ahead to next week in college football, there are a few interesting games. As I mentioned, there's that USC Colorado game is one. Georgia against Auburn. That's pretty interesting. I think Georgia certainly is expected to win that, but it is at home for Auburn. So there's potential, cool stuff that could happen there.
Well, so I would agree with you about that Georgia game. That could be interesting, but even though it's at Auburn, I just feel like Georgia's got just so much more talent, and they're so well coached. I think this might be a little bit of a coming out party for Georgia. I actually think Georgia wins that one comfortably.
Mm-hmm. And it's sort of similar, although this one's actually at home for Texas. Texas is playing against Kansas, who is ranked 24th. So, they're not bad, but I think that one will go Texas's way.
Yeah, I agree. I think Texas is the clearly more talented team at this point, and they have confidence from their previous wins. Although Kansas is a very well coached football team, I just think that they lack the talent, position by position, to hang with Texas for 4 quarters.
Right. Now this is interesting. LSU is playing against Ole Miss. It's a home game for Ole Miss, so obviously Ole Miss lost to Alabama, right? But as we mentioned, it was a pretty close game in certain respects. And then LSU narrowly won against Arkansas. So I'm sure LSU is going in as the favorite, but it's another one where I think Ole Miss certainly has upset potential. What do you think?
Well, you know what? I guess I may regret this, but I'm going to go with LSU in this case. I just feel like from the standpoint of the two coaches, just looking at the two coaches, I have a feeling that Brian Kelly's going to be very unhappy about how his team performed, even though they won. He's going to be telling about and identifying all the areas they need to improve in. And I feel like I just don't know enough about the rest of Ole Miss's team to determine whether they're going to be able to rebound from the Alabama thing. It is home at Ole Miss, though, which should give them a little bit of a leg up. But I still say LSU wins, but in a tight one.
Okay. Well, I decided they did let me down against Alabama, but I'm going to stick with Ole Miss. And since this is a home game, I'm going to say that they narrowly beat LSU in a close game. Let's say it's a similar score to the Arkansas game. So, yeah, let's go with 30 for LSU to 33 Ole Miss.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go just based on last week's game. I'm going to go 31 LSU, 24 Ole Miss.
All right. Very good. And then another fun game is Notre Dame playing against Duke. Duke is having a good year this year, and it is a home game for Duke. So Notre Dame also coming in right off of a close loss to Ohio State. So once again, I would say they're the favorite, but it is certainly not an easy game, and it would be a huge win for Duke if they were able to pull that one off for that program. So what are your thoughts there?
I'm picking Duke. I'm going out because your sister's going to be there, and because we have a friend who plays for Duke, or a friend's son, I guess, who plays for Duke. I'm going to jump on the Duke bandwagon. Remember, this is a team that beat Clemson comfortably. So Duke's for real. And I kind of wonder about what is Notre Dame's, are they going to be licking their wounds? Are they going to be both emotionally and physically spent after having played at home and losing in a heartbreaker, just a gut wrencher to Ohio State?
Mm-hmm. All right. I think I'm going to go with Notre Dame here. This time I'm going to side with the favorite, even though I want Duke to win. Like you mentioned, Olivia will be at that game. But I'm going to say that Notre Dame wins. Let's say it's a higher scoring game of 38 Notre Dame to 28 Duke.
That sounds like an interesting score. Do I have to give a score?
You do.
Oh, God. I'm going to say, again, lower scoring. I'm going to say 24 for Duke and 17 for Notre Dame.
Interesting. You're going low scoring, defensive game.
Yeah, defensive game.
Okay. Well, after that, the score in that Ohio State game, you might be right on that. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
And then one final topic we wanted to discuss was Nebraska Volleyball, which we love cheering on, our women's volleyball team. And they had a big week here playing against two in-conference opponents, Ohio State and Minnesota. And they beat them both, I believe, both in 3-set sweeps. But you can correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yes, we did win both of those matches in 3 sets. And but they were hard-fought. Big Ten victories in which the teams really elevate their play. Some outstanding individual athletes on the other teams. Ohio State has some great young talent, and Minnesota has some maturity in their team. But we were able to overcome it, even though we're young as well. So I think just a great learning experience for our freshmen. But I think it also exposed some weaknesses that other teams are going to be able to target and try to take advantage of. So the great thing for our coach, John Cook, is he's going to have some ammo, so to speak, and some film footage to review with his team to make them better. And so hopefully we'll continue to see that team, that Husker squad, keep getting better every match. Now, it doesn't get any easier because now this next coming weekend is on the road, and we're going to be facing a top 20 ranked Purdue team and then an Indiana team that's one of the best serving teams in the whole country. So, and has some real talent. It's really starting to build some momentum. So, two very challenging away games this coming week.
Those are going to be tough. The Big Ten is very strong in volleyball right now, so we have to play a rough schedule. But if we can come through it, we'll have great strength of schedule, and we'll have been forged in the fires, as they say, for the NCAA tournament.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
One little comment I want to make is my boss at work just randomly brought up that crazy long rally that Nebraska had with Kentucky, that went on for like a minute.
Yep.
I guess he saw that somewhere. So that clip is definitely getting passed around.
Right. Right. It was pretty remarkable. And so we've gotten a lot of media attention, even outside the sport of volleyball, with the things that we've been doing this year on the court. So that's always exciting for the team and the sport itself.
Yeah. Well, and I also noticed when I was watching the TV broadcast of this football game, they showed some clips from the volleyball night yet again. So I'm sure they'll stop with that at some point, but they're definitely getting in there and saying, "Hey, isn't this cool?" At every chance they get, it feels like.
Right. Absolutely. They're trying to maximize the impact.
That's right. Very smart. All right. Well, is there anything else you want to fill our listeners in on before we wrap up for this week?
Well, it's interesting. I feel like we need to have an assessment on the whole refereeing and rules thing again. There's just some things that I'm seeing in patterns, not just the Nebraska game, but just in general as I'm watching college football games across the board. And this past weekend, the just absurd holding that I watched and witnessed occur in all of those games, the Florida State Clemson game, the Ohio State Notre Dame game, all these big time games. And there's just atrocious holding going on, and they're not calling it. And so I really would love to see, somebody who has the access to, an NCAA referee expert or NCAA referee to have a sit down and take a cut up of 15 or 20 of these blatant holding calls and say, why isn't this being called? Why isn't this being called? Why isn't this being called? And not necessarily put that particular individual ref on the spot, but to have them explain, well, here's why these happen and the refs don't see them, because the refs are looking at X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and F and G. And, this is just one of those things that they're looking at. And so, of course, they're going to miss them. And if that's the case, then maybe they can talk practically about, okay, well, so that means maybe an extra referee would be helpful. So he only has to look at half of those things and the other guy's looking at the other half. Something's got to be done, or they got to change the rules and make holding legal.
Right. Well, and you just made me think, I want to say this was in the Northern Illinois game, although I may be wrong, but there was like one play where I think we had a receiver catch a ball and he kind of got stopped by the opposing player, but he was still upright, and his forward momentum stopped, but the ref hadn't blown the whistle yet. And then another player on the defense came in and hit him, and it was leading with his helmet. There was definitely some helmet to helmet contact, it felt like to me. And to me, that's much more egregious than some of the targeting plays that we've had called on us, right? Which seemed very, ticky tack. This one was a helpless player who's being stood up, but can't move forward, being ran into by a guy going full speed, but they didn't call it. They just moved on to the next play.
And these are the things that I would love to get, because again, if you're going to have that rule, we need to catch it the vast majority of the time, or we need to make it legal so that a game isn't being dramatically shifted in one team's favor or the other because they happen to get away with an egregious violation of the rules, but they just didn't get caught. You just can't have rules that aren't going to be enforced, is effectively what I'm saying. And I get that you can't have 100% enforcement, but it just seems like I'm already observing an even worse implementation of the holding penalty. I think it is being called 20% of the time. Okay. And 80% of the time, players are getting away with it. And so now that means, and has meant for quite some time, that holding is being taught.
Right.
And it's just, you do it these certain ways and you're more sure to get away with it.
Well, so then,
to me, that's wrong.
Would you compliment then the refs in this game? Because they were calling holding quite a bit on both sides of the ball.
Well,
in our game, I mean.
Except that they were calling it very often on running plays, not passing plays, which is a whole nother element of this. Is I believe that it is called probably over 50% of the time when it occurs on running plays, maybe even 70 or 80%. But on passing plays, it's being called 10 or 15%. So there's something about how they define holding on a pass play versus a running play that is dramatically different in how they actually choose to throw the flag.
Right.
So I would love that conversation. And, again, a defensive holding, pass interference, and targeting would all be part of the mix of a conversation about this. But specifically this year, I feel like I'm just seeing literally jerseys, handfuls of jerseys, and this doesn't get called.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. I think the sport needs to address it.
Yes. Well, we've been talking about for quite a few years now, having some sort of proper, oversight of the refs, having some sort of meeting where they all decide on the rules together, set standards, rather than it being like each conference having their own refs,
Right.
which has created these discrepancies between, okay, what conference are these refs from, that are in this game, and they call things a little bit differently, in the details, right? Which can have
Right.
an effect on the games. So yeah, it needs to be streamlined for sure.
Yep. And I just so that'll be something I'll continue to monitor, and I might bring it up again on the podcast, especially as we approach maybe the end of the year. And maybe we need to see if there's a way that we can find a rules expert that would be willing to come on the podcast with us, or that we could at least get some quotes from after we answer the questions. Do a Q&A.
Yeah, that might be something to do. So if you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave us a rating or review there. Let us know what you think of the podcast. We'll read your comments out on the air. So thank you all for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. Until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.